is the voice of the uninvited.
It's coming from downstairs.
It comes from everywhere and nowhere.
A house of terror on the haunted cliffs of Cornwall, where the uninvited walk unseen by men. Yet a cat arches its back in fright. Flowers are withered by the touch of an unseen, malignant hand. Candles flicker and die as a ghostly chill fills the air, and the living are clutched by the icy horror of the restless dead.
Stop, Pamela. Don't go near that door.
The Uninvited, Dorothy McCardle's gripping novel of the supernatural, comes to the screen, starring Ray Milland, Ruth Hussey, Donald Crisp, with Cornelia Otis Skinner, and introducing the exciting beauty of Gail Russell, whose first love is shadowed by the specters of the past.
Stella, what is it?
Are you ill, Stella?
Quiet. Leave her alone.
Huygens.
Stop her, Scott.
She's in a trance. I saw this happen once before at a seance. I thought it was a fake.
But this isn't.
I know. It's dangerous.
Please get out of this house now.
Now lie there quietly. I'm not afraid of anything here.
Then be afraid. Be afraid for heaven's sake. When you were a little child, the evils of this house reached out for you. Stella! Go! Go!
Horror Hounds, welcome to episode 5 of the Black Sunday Tapes Classic Horror. This week we're looking into a film that neither me or Michael had seen before we decided to jump down a rabbit hole for this episode. I had a really good time with it. I hope Michael had a good time with it. We're about to find out. Michael, let these fine people know what film we're looking into this week.
So this week we're going with 1944's The Uninvited, which is Lewis Allen's first film as a director. And it's considered by a good number of historians to be the finest haunted house picture ever made. And when you look at it, it's definitely of its time, which is it's very, very 40s. It opens with some narration. Some of the acting is a little forced at times. But then again, you've got... Did you recognize the doctor?
No, I didn't. I don't think I did.
Well, if you put glasses on him and you fast forward 22 years, he was playing Alfred the Butler.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was Alfred in Batman 66.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That's a great bit of trivia off the top. Oh, I love that.
So
I love that. No, I had no idea.
There's a lot of good stuff in here, and we'll get into it. But the scale of the set was next level bonkers, insane, impressive to me.
Yeah, that's what really stood out to me is, again, going in blind. I really didn't want to know too much, but to be honest with you, as you said, it's a film that is brought up by film historians all the time. It's a massive favourite of a lot of filmmakers that we grew up idolising. Scorsese says it's one of, the finest horror pictures ever made. Del Toro says the same. This is a big, big favourite among filmmakers that have made some of our favourite films of all time, some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, right?
Absolutely.
So I knew a little bit going in. I didn't know too much though. And to be honest with you, I was quite happy that I didn't know that much because...
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because you got to go in and let the story unravel, live with these characters from start to finish for the first time. And to be honest with you, it's quite rare that happens for me these days, especially...
Same.
Yeah, with new films, you find that so much out of the gate, don't you? It's quite nice going in and just, living with that for the hour and a half, 2 hours, and really, enjoying this film. And I did enjoy it. What were your impressions?
I absolutely enjoyed it. If you listen to any of our other episodes, you know that I'm big into cinematography. So the fact that the money was spent to have a house that was so large they could have camera movements from one floor to another and track. What about you?
I completely agree. That's the thing that jumps off the screen straight away, right? Is the cinematography.
Oh, so
the
much.
set building. Yeah, it's incredible. It really, really stands out. It's a character itself within the film, which it always should be. I think any good haunted house film, the house, the setting, whatever it is,
If
the
the location is in
haunted
the title of
hospital,
the genre,
exactly,
like
right,
it needs to be a character.
exactly. And I think this was maybe the best use of a location, definitely one of the best use of a location I've ever seen. So I understand why a lot of
I will agree. Yeah.
filmmakers rant and rave about it. They use the location very, very well. They use the location to set up the story very, very well. This isn't a scary film. It isn't a horror film in the sense of you're going to jump out your seat and there's a lot of frights here. It's a very character driven ghost story with a
That being said, though, it
romantic
totally.
backdrop,
Oh,
to
sorry,
be fair.
but the seance I actually found kind of unsettling.
I thought the science was quite creepy. I thought,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a, not to ruin it for anyone, but the main character is called Stella. And during a seance scene, she becomes possessed, I guess you would say. That's all I'm going to say on that scene,
Yeah.
not to spoil it for anyone.
Absolutely.
And I thought Gal Russell, who plays Stella, her performance was incredible within that scene. I think she's
Oh
great
yeah.
through the whole film, and we'll get into her a little bit in a minute. But her performance in this scene in particular, I thought showed really great range, and her performance delivered quite a creepy element
Oh,
that
absolutely.
isn't in any of the other scenes. That definitely stood out. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That really, really stood out. But saying it's not a scary film or anything like that, I don't think that should ruin your experience. Don't let that put you off. This, as Michael says, it's a film of its time. This was made in the 40s, from the acting, from the sets, from the cinematography.
And
However,
if you're gonna go in, like, and please do, you just like know that up front, because tiny little sidebar, like the first time I tried to watch Logan's Run, I put it in and all I could do was laugh for 15 minutes at what I
right,
was looking at, how
yeah,
retro future it was. I was
of
not
course,
prepared. I shut
of
it off. I
course,
came back to it like 2 years later and I loved it.
right,
But it was
exactly,
because I knew what it was and I could let it happen. So just know that this movie is coming up on 100 years old. It's
yeah,
but it's very affecting if you let it be.
yes, it's very, very affecting. And from a character-driven point of view, again, it may be the finest example of a character-driven ghost story. I think it's really that good.
And some of the
The
stuff I looked at, they said it was one of the first times it had been taken seriously as a ghost story and not a Scooby Doo style. The ghost is a person type thing.
Right, well, from what I understand, it is the first. Definitely
Is
on a Hollywood level.
okay.
Yeah, so and that's the other thing, right? This is a Hollywood picture, and when I mean that, this isn't your low budget,
Not even
run of the mill
close.
horror film. No, this
Yeah, this was
is
treated as an A picture in 1940. Oh, what they probably 43, and it came out in 44. They gave it 1.5 million dollars.
this
So,
is an A picture, and it looks like an A picture.
oh yeah,
It looks like an A picture. It's treated like an A picture. It's directed and acted like an A picture. It's shot like an A picture, and you can tell. You can
and the cover
really,
looks
really tell.
pretty. Like if you're like, whoa, this is 1944. This looks kind of okay right now.
Oh, this looks fantastic. This looks absolutely fantastic. It's a gorgeous film. It's a really, really beautiful film. I think
And
that's obvious,
the
though.
image
I
clarity
can't
on,
stress that.
on a good restoration is just it's next level. Like it might be black and white. I'm not saying you're going to see color watching it in black and white, but it has every bit. I mean, I find some black and white imagery to even be more striking and emotional than colored imagery.
I completely agree.
So
And depending on the film and the subject matter, I completely agree. That is the use of black and white can really enhance that experience. We spoke about last week Little Shop of Horrors. There is a color version of that,
oh yeah,
and I haven't gone back and watched it yet, but I
I
will because I am quite interested in seeing that in color. If there was a color version of this, I wouldn't care for it.
nah,
I wouldn't. There's just no need for it. It doesn't. I just feel like with this type of film, yeah, it really, really works with the black and white cinematography.
oh yeah,
And to bring that round to the ghost story, the paranormal story, this is a really important film because, as Michael touched on, and from what I understand, this is the first time Hollywood took ghost stories seriously, especially on this level. You had a few films in the 10, 20 years that preceded this, but they're all, for better or worse, comedic ghost stories. None of them are serious.
right.
They're all comedy. This was the first time ghosts were ever taken seriously. But the idea of taking a ghost story seriously, not making it about laughs or scares really, but about the characters and how it affects the characters. And this film is all about Stella. It's all about her journey.
Hmm.
It's all about how her whole life in this film is affected by this house and the history of this house. So to treat a ghost story with that much respect, I think is something that really, really should be applauded.
100%. Like it's one of those, like, even if you don't appreciate like the kind of film it is, you got to appreciate that the Hollywood system let it be made.
Exactly. So let's get into the actors. I touched on Gal Russell. Who really stood out for you in this? Who did you really like?
Like everybody had their own charms. Like I really liked that, even that small character of the maid. Like her couple mispronunciations were giggle worthy, and fun. But I mean, like, yeah, Gail Russell is 100% the standout of the film to me,
Yeah, I
and
completely agree.
appreciated Milland for a lot of different reasons, because he was, to me, it was admirable, like the way that he delivered the of the time leading man, but then also, like, even though it's like on a dime turn for no reason, where he's just like, I suddenly feel like I've been flattened, and it's just out of the blue. Like he has emotion to his life, and he lets it through in performance in a way that I don't know, man, it spoke to me.
Both of their performances stand out to me. So the leads of the film are Gal Russell and Ray Milland, who both were incredible actors, both had success elsewhere in other films and in Ray Milland's career TV later on.
A lot of
Both were
TV,
incredible in
Mission
this film.
Impossible
Yeah,
and
a lot
stuff.
of
Yeah,
TV.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, hell of a lot of TV. Really, really successful actors. Again, it's probably that idea where even if you haven't seen this film, which may be one of their, or in Gal Russell's career, this probably is the most famous film she ever done.
Yeah,
Ray Milland's got a
kind of
few others
unfortunately,
that
but
kind of
yeah.
top this, yeah. What's really interesting for me in their performances is how, when you dig into the history a little bit, where they were in their private lives at the time kind of play into who these characters are.
Very much so.
Like Ray Milland was, from what I understand, kind of falling out of love a little bit with acting. He weren't really sure where his place was with it. He was kind of just doing it for the paycheck at the time. So
Yeah, pretty much.
a lot of that haunting, the lost soul that he is trying to portray in this film genuinely is him. He
Hmm.
didn't really know
Hmm.
where he was going with his career, though he was quite successful. And then Gal Russell, unfortunately, had quite a troubled life, as in, she was thrust into the studio system at a very early age,
It, yeah,
didn't
she
believe
was
in
like
her,
17. Yeah.
right, didn't believe in her ability as an actress, even though I think she's absolutely outstanding in this film. And for my money,
The,
she delivers the
her
best
performance is
performance in this film.
extremely of the time, but it's if you don't feel the emotion, then I'm not certain why we're even watching the movie. You should at least try to connect to it
Right,
somehow.
exactly.
Come on.
Well, I still think there's lines of dialogue and there's certain character traits that are of the time. But aside from that, I feel her acting actually really stands up today.
Absolutely.
A lot more than any of the other actors, and that's not a slight on any of the actors.
At all. Yeah,
It's just
sure. Yeah.
the changing of Hollywood. But in terms of Gal Russell, I feel like a lot of her acting is actually way ahead of its time, and you can see her in pictures from the 60s, pictures from the 70s, pictures from the 80s. You can see her influence the whole way through. I have no doubt, as this film influenced a lot of filmmakers, that her performance influenced a lot of actresses of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So the history of Gal Russell's career, for those that don't know, is, as we've touched on, she was put into a 6 or 7 film contract with Paramount. She was basically signed because of her looks, though, as you will see in this film, if you have watched it or are going to watch it, she is incredible. She has a ton of acting talent.
Apparently, a lot of that has to do with the relationship with Ray Milland, who in between takes would rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse with her in order to try to, everybody look better, but also just try to make her more comfortable with it.
Of course, because she was extremely nervous. She had no faith in her acting ability to the point where on set she would visibly shake. And I can't for the life of me think what film it is, but there was a film she done a few years after this where she was shaking so much that they tied her hands down
I did hear
because
about this.
yeah, they literally could not film with her because she was so visibly shaken. Unfortunately, what that led to was a lot of alcohol in her life, and she would drink a hell of a lot, which I believe started on the set of the Uninvited. So her first major film role, she's already drinking. She's very, very young, and unfortunately, for all the talent she had, and she was in a few decent films, a few very well received films. She unfortunately passed away at the age of 36 due to
very young.
alcoholism. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is really sad, man. Especially when you go back and watch something like The Uninvited and see how incredible she is. For whatever reason, never found the confidence in herself or had the people around her that instilled that confidence in her. Which is extremely sad. You touched on him a minute ago. Ray Milland was responsible for taking Gal Russell under his wing and really helping her with this performance and really helping her with her nerves on this film. So let's touch on Ray Milland for a little bit because though I've made no secret of it, I think Gal Russell is incredible in this film. Ray Milland is really good, really really good, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
I completely forgot the amount of top Hollywood films that Ray Milland is in. We're speaking about him now for The Uninvited, which again, in our opinion, is a great Hollywood horror.
Absolutely.
But
100%.
Ray Milland was also the lead in Hitchcock's Darwin for Murder
There you
and the
go.
lead in The Lost Weekend, which were two juggernauts, two huge hits. So the fact that he, was more than a one-trick pony and was able to kind of last as long as he did was incredible. And for anyone that's seen The Lost Weekend, or if you haven't seen The Lost Weekend, please go and watch it because he is
Don't hate me. I haven't
outstanding
seen it
in
yet.
the film. No, do you know what? It's one of those films that I put off for the longest time as well. Just wasn't really. I'd heard of it, wasn't on my radar to watch though, and then I think it might have been on TV
Okay.
one day, and yeah, I just sat down to watch it, and
I mean, I'm
my
definitely
God,
curious
I'm glad I
about it.
did.
It was just its price point was a little high for me at most times that I had easy access to it.
That's the problem. That's the
Yeah.
problem. But he's
Although
outstanding.
I'm gonna have to now that we're talking about it, I'm gonna have to look into it. Maybe it's one of those like $4 streaming things. I'll have to do that soon.
Yes, definitely. Well worth watching. So just a little sidebar there. Yeah, go and check out Lost Weekend for anyone that hasn't. Or do you know what? If you have, go back and watch it. I feel like I want to go back and watch it now, just for his performance and Darwin for Murder. To be fair, but yeah, what did you think of Ray Milland in this film?
I found him, very affecting. Like his ability, like I said a little earlier, like his ability to be what Hollywood leading man needed to be. But I don't know. Maybe I mean I've seen a lot of classic Hollywood, but I haven't seen like a giant swath of it. So perhaps there are more performers that delivered the same sort of like almost stage acting, and then you could see where what you kind of think of as film acting now coming to their forefront a little bit.
Of course,
I
yeah.
felt he had some of the best that I saw of the getting emotion through in a way that I hadn't seen in the era before.
I completely agree with that. He is the bridge between modern cinema or at what actors would become in the 50s and certainly the 60s and 70s and your Cary Grants, your Humphrey Bogarts, your
Yeah, yeah.
outstanding and again that isn't a slight, for anyone that doesn't know, Humphrey Bogart's my favorite actor of all time.
Go.
It's very much of that era. It's very hard to take a Humphrey Bogart or a Cary Grant or a James Cagney out of their era and put them anywhere else. I feel with Ray Milland, and actually you could argue he did. Ray Milland was acting all the way up until the 1980s.
Hmm.
So that shows his range of talent and how far he was able to take that talent to go from huge hits in 40s, then have huge hit in the 50s or a couple of hits in the 50s with Hitchcock, Darwin for Murder, and a couple of others, all the way through to the 60s, the 70s, and then carry on acting until the 80s. That's a hell of a career. That's really, really impressive.
You don't have that kind of staying power unless you're one of the Illuminati, man, or you just
Yeah.
got that talent.
Maybe he was part of the Illuminati. Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows? That's next week's episode. Ray
There it
Milland
is.
and the Illuminati.
No, it'll be our first crossover with things that go bump in the night.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Full channel cross promotion on
There
Ray
it is.
Milland and the Illuminati. So we've touched on those two. What did you think about the rest of the cast?
I enjoyed every performance. Even like the background actors, none of them felt super background actory. As sometimes like you watch that person in the background who's like just a normal person, and I am walking down a street.
Yeah, for me, the rest of the cast really, really work as well. I don't think there was a bad performance in this whole film.
Absolutely not.
I thought obviously, we've spoke about the two leads. I thought the two leads were incredible, but for those that haven't seen the film, as I've said, mainly follows Stella, but actually is kicked off by a brother and sister who purchased the house in question. So you've got Roderick Fitzgerald, and then you've got his sister Pamela Fitzgerald, and I thought Ruth Hussey, I believe her name is, she played that role extremely well. It isn't as chunky a role as with her brother's role or with Stella's role, but for what she adds to the film, it really worked for me, man. I thought she was really, really good. And then I think everyone works on the film, but then the one performance I do want to bring up, just because there's actually some really interesting trivia around this, is there is a character called Miss Holloway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the film story revolves around this main estate house and its haunting of a spirit, and the spirit is believed to be that of Stella's mother.
Sure.
However, Miss Holloway's involvement in this film, and in a scene in particular when she's describing her past with Stella's mum, leans very, very heavily on the idea, though it is not said in the exact words, that their relationship was more than friends. And what's really, really interesting about this is when you go back and watch older Hollywood films, classic Hollywood films, sometimes in today's age, putting on your 2020 glasses, you can see, oh, okay, they were hinting at this, they were hinting at that. However, back in the day, it wasn't, it was done so under the radar that no one really picked up back in the day. What's really interesting about this is, again, though it wasn't said in so many words, it is done in a way where back in 1944, this was picked up by a lot of people, and it was something that was quite controversial. The fact that you had the churches reaching out and right into the code, but also right into cinemas, from what I understand, about unruly congregations that were going to watch this film, is really, really interesting from the point of view.
Yeah, I didn't read any about that. Do you have any more about that or no?
Not too much. All
Okay.
all I read from a few places was that because of the underlining idea of Miss Holloway and Stella's mum being in a romantic relationship, so the lesbian connotations of that, you had a lot of young girls who people were getting worried about, because you had these groups of young girls that were going to watch this film,
Okay.
and they were worried that it was leaving a lasting impression. And the other thing with the film is it doesn't present it in a right or wrong fashion. It simply presents it as, this is the character, this is her experiences, and this is who she is. It doesn't say to you it's right to do this, it's wrong to do this. It just says this is who this character is, which
Exactly.
is the most human way possible of presenting that story. And they were really, really worried about how that was affecting audiences, especially young girls watching it at the time. So you had a lot of church groups coming out and kind of condemning the movie, or condemning that character, Miss Holloway's character, and that scene for those exact reasons.
Well, an interesting sidebar to this about censorship, kind of. So Lewis Allen didn't want to depict the ghosts at all, and
Yes,
like
yes.
his early cuts had no ghost, and the studio kind of forced him to go back and show the ghosts. And when the film came out in your neck of the woods, over in the UK, the ghosts were removed for censorship reasons, and he was
Yes.
praised for his restraint.
Yeah, I find that really, really interesting. I love little trivia bits like that. I think that's really interesting. Another little trivia bit that I want to touch on briefly is, do you know that there was a loose sequel made?
And like the next year or the year after, like a year or
Yeah,
two later.
literally next year. Yeah, 1945. So The Uninvited came out in 1944, and the next year you had a film called The Unseen, which is a loose sequel. And I say it's a loose sequel because the only returning actor from the original film is that of Gal Russell. However, she is playing a completely different character.
Naturally.
Yes, naturally, a completely
Okay.
different character. But yeah, I haven't seen that film, but I just thought that was quite interesting because if you're going down this rabbit hole and you're interested in watching The Unseen, and this is the real reason I bring it up, if you happen to find somewhere to watch The Unseen, please drop it in the comments. Please
Yeah,
let
let
us
us
know
know,
because
please.
from what
Now,
I understand, this film has never been released on home video.
it was actually in my research that it's kind of commercially unavailable. I didn't know that, but at the time of this release, it was 100%. You couldn't get your hands on it.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's an impossible feat. I don't know. Maybe it is out there. Maybe it is out there, but I couldn't find it. All right, buddy. So, is there any extra trivia that you've got that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, man. So two of the special features on this Criterion disc are radio dramas from one's from 1949 and the other one's from 4. And one of the things I found very very interesting was that the one that came out in 1944, it was still a haunted house picture, but the radio program was like a half an hour sitcom. You know, when
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
they would program that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a 30-minute version of the movie. It was like I think it was like a 26-minute version of the movie. They managed to hit just about everything, but what I found interesting was like they almost all the horror stuff was just gone, and it was a comedy about a haunted house.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't mean like it was like an over the top Abbott and Costello comedy,
Yeah.
but it was the same story, but like the seance scene, like I was really looking forward to the seance scene. They didn't do it at all. Like 4 minutes into this radio adaptation, they are already in the house. And
Oh,
then
okay.
the one from 1949, which is interesting, is both of them Ray Milland was in, and in the 1944 one, it was both Ray Milland and Ruth Hussey that were the leads in the radio adaptation.
Yes.
And then the 1949 one was much more a radio drama horror. Like they didn't just do the seance; it took up the majority of Act Two, and it was very, very interesting to me to see the dichotomy in the way that they handled the same material.
There's a few films from back in the classic Hollywood era that get the radio treatment, and it is always very, very interesting to see the way in which they do adapt them because sometimes, like you said, with that first adaptation, they go down the road of completely changing it and making it more comedy, but then someone else will pick it up and make it more horror, or really just focus on the horror elements.
Another bit of information I found very interesting in the essay was sort of why The Uninvited works so well emotionally, as opposed to some other films that might be affecting but not necessarily personal. In as much as the film really works because it's relatable. So, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a great movie, but animals on a random road trip. Whereas if you happen to find yourself in a large abandoned house situation, you very likely are going to hear and see.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
I
like it
completely,
was like I just hadn't thought about it that way, but as soon as it was pointed out, I was like, oh yeah, no, 100% yes.
yeah, I completely agree with that.
The interview mentioned a few times ends with a question about The Uninvited and its widespread appreciation. The Uninvited is widely regarded as one of the top ghost movies. A lot of people say it's the best ghost movie. What is the key to making a successful ghost movie like The Uninvited? Well, I think the whole point when you're making a scary movie is to try and be honest and as straightforward as you can, and not be phony. I treated The Uninvited as though I believed in it.
I fully agree. Actually, I think for me it does work as one of the finest.
Yeah,
Especially one of the
haunted
finest
houses
classic
don't
ghost
typically.
stories. There, we tell ghost stories very, very differently now.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying like this movie like, oh, I maybe crap my pants, I jumped out my skin, but like it works in emotional ways, and like I said, like I like it's not scary really at all. But the seance was different and creepy enough that I was like, no, okay, that's creepy. That's
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah, I think it really works on that level. It works on a level of it's not really about the ghosts. It's not about the scares. It's about the characters. And once you buy into the
Absolutely.
characters, once you like the characters and you're following their journey, then you do care about them. And then off the back of that, there is fear attached to that. It might not be the jump scares we've become so used to,
Yeah, absolutely.
the scares that make us jump out of our seat, but there
And
is
jump scares that get me are
fear.
few and far between, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, there was a moment in this that really did get me up off my seat. Like, really
Go.
like had my heart pounding my chest. And it's the part where Stella runs out of the house
Out of
onto,
nowhere.
yeah,
Out of
out of no,
nowhere.
right, onto the caves. No, I think it's the second time she does. She does it like a first time and then like gets saved quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then on the second time she does it, Ray Milland's character is chasing her, and
Okay.
I just thought it's going to play out the same way the first one did, right? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, she's going to run, he's going to grab her as they get to the cliffs, fine. But the way this plays out is she gets to the cliff, she stands on the edge, and then the whole like rock face starts to break and crumble to the point where she falls and has to grab something herself because he's too late. And then he pulls her up. And that bit for me is I just was not expecting that. So as like she falls, it just like jolted me up and I was like, oh shit, is she? I was like, did she just die? Did she? And then
Are they gonna
obviously
go here? Yeah.
yeah, and then yeah, are they doing that? Are they going? But no, man, that really got me. That worked really well. But it worked so well because by the time they pull that trick, I really, really cared about Stella.
Hmm.
So it works on that level because at that point you do not want this girl to die. Where that's a real missed beat in a lot of films now, right? And I think that's fine if that's the story you're trying to tell. But if you're trying to tell this from the point of view of your characters and we're meant to fear for their lives in any way, shape, or form, we have to care about them characters. And what The Uninvited does so well is it spends so much time in making you like these characters and especially Stella. That then for
Okay.
me, when that moment come, when that beat come, yeah, I jumped out my seat because I was like, oh shit, are they gonna kill her?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Worked really, really well, man. Really worked on me. I really loved it. So there's one last piece of trivia that I want to touch on, which yeah, I think is really cool. So within the film, there's a little melody that Stella has played to her, and it's just a little piano tune, and it's titled "Stella" by Starlight. There's no lyrics within the film, and it was purely composed as the piece you hear in the film, just a little piano tune. That is it. However, it started picking up a bit of fandom in itself. You know,
Hmm.
a lot of people liked it. A lot of people started listening to it to the point where a few years after the film come out, they actually added lyrics to this song. Someone went in, they wrote lyrics, and Stella by Starlight become a proper jazz song. It becomes so popular that there were recordings from many artists that done very well. Probably most noteworthy is in 1947, Frank Sinatra recorded a version of this song.
I do believe Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles also did
Right,
as well.
exactly, exactly. It's been covered by anyone that's done jazz. They've all covered it. Everyone's covered it. Here's what's really interesting about this: that piece of music transcended the film. That piece of music really stuck with people, and so much so that they wrote lyrics, and then these ginormous juggernaut artists recorded it, and it become big hits for them. What's really interesting about that, it was nominated for one Oscar. It was nominated for the Oscar for Best Cinematography, which, by the way,
Well,
it didn't win, though it
it
should have.
should have.
Yeah, the Academy didn't see anything in the music of The Uninvited, which Stella by Starlight is a great piece to pluck out from this film. But I think overall the music is really, really good and really adds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that about does it for me, buddy. Anything else from you?
No, I think we covered just about everything, man.
I think
So,
we covered,
uh,
yeah, just about everything.
I
Definitely one to
just,
go and
I know we
watch.
both definitely, yeah. I was just, that's exactly where I was going. We both highly recommend that you seek this one out. You know, pick up the Criterion if you can find it, and or find it for a good price, or rent it for a couple bucks if you have that option. It's definitely one you should check out if you like horror.
Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful film. It's a really influential film. Even if you're going in from that point, from a historic point of view, go in, watch it. I think you're definitely going to get something out of this. It is a little bit slower for modern horror fans, but to be honest, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably open to some slower told horror stories. So yeah, I definitely think this is one to watch, guys. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. It means the absolute world to us, the love and support we're getting for this podcast. And until next week, stay safe, horror hounds.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.